So you operate in a very interesting space because you're creating drugs and technology related to age-related diseases to help increase healthy lives or health or longer health spans, so to speak. Um, this is your, I believe, your fourth company that you've started. Maybe it's more than that. Fifth.
Fit.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, but let's start with Immunis and how you decided to kind of embark on this path or this line of uh, drug development.
Yeah, I have been for a drug developer for a long time, conceiving of medicines, putting them into mice, and then if it works, putting them into humans, and then big pharma takes them. So that's been my drug development history. And I noticed along that path that most of the problems that we experience as humans have to do with our aging immune system. It's very, very well documented that the immune system is the primary driver of your ability to grow muscle. It's the primary influence on your metabolism, joint repair, your ability to fight bugs, a whole bunch of other things, arterial stiffness, even cognition, the immune system has a whole lot of influence on. And of course, it's a required element of cancer, a defunct immune system. And most diseases require a defective immune system. And injuries, of course, and their ability to repair requires it. So it's such a fundamental aspect of aging because we know that the immune system declines in functionality with age. So Immunis was really born to target something that's never been targeted before.
Mhm. And we rarely, I guess, draw the connection between the immune system and muscle health.
Mhm.
Um, but apparently that there's a big, link there. And so would like to better understand maybe how what you're developing helps maintain muscle mass.
Yeah, certainly. It's very well known that the cells that make muscle require the immune system to divide. So they're called satellite cells and fibroadipocytes. And these young, think of them like stem cells, but they're not because stem cells make everything in the body. These are more like tissue restricted progenitor cells, early cells that, the earliest cells of muscle that are dedicated only to making muscle. And their ability to divide in response to being ripped and hurt and damaged like you do when you lift weights, when you just walk and function in life, their ability to repair that muscle is directly caused by immune factors. And it's very well documented. So as we age, we birth our immune system less frequently. Therefore, we have fewer youngsters of the immune system, immune dedicated progenitors in our bloodstream. Your immunological peak at 27, and after that, it's pretty much downhill in the frequency that you birth your immune system. And we do know that it's the young cells that secrete, that release into their environment hundreds and hundreds of growth factors that keep that tissue, whatever that progenitor cell was making, whether that be heart or liver or brain or immune, these secretions bathe the rest of those youngsters of that same tissue, in this case immune, and cause them all to become healthy. It's development and health. So as we birth our immune system less frequently with age, we have fewer of these factors. And so we had hypothesized that this known function of immunological decline was responsible for the decrease of muscle development.
Mm.
And so, in order to test that, we developed a naturally occurring secretion from young cells that have been pushed towards that immunological lineage. And frankly, we just farm them by the billions and take their secretome, the sum total of that which is secreted by the cell population, and then we've applied it to both rodents and humans and seen tremendous functional muscle repair and development. And I can talk about that more specifically, but to answer your question, Um, the literature is very solid in telling us with certainty that the immune system controls muscle development, but there's been no drug because drugs are usually single active ingredients, and the control of muscle has multiple proteins. So we conceived of a multi-active secretome-based product that has the whole milieu of these young cells that secrete and cause the development and health of the organ. And we were right. When we put this into humans, they have functional betterment of muscle.
Mhm. And maybe to give us a sense for where you are in the company building process or company life cycle, when were you founded and kind of what stage are you at now with the company?
Yeah, so we were founded about 5 years ago, and early and quiet, and the development of a drug takes years and years, from a dish to a mouse to human clinical trials. So we are basically at the point where we have phase 1/2A clinical trials completed, investigating the safety, the tolerability, and preliminary efficacy of Immunis's investigational therapy, this IM1 stem, in reversing muscle atrophy in elderly individuals. We insisted those individuals have knee osteoarthritis, so they could not exercise. So none of the muscle benefit that we hoped to see, and indeed we did, could be confused with an increased exercise regime. They just can't. They have moderate knee osteoarthritis, they're on walkers and canes, etc. So that study demonstrated that we have a very clean product. We have perfect safety and tolerability profile. So no adverse events attributed to our drug. And the participants treated with our product walked further. So they had a statistically significant enhancement of their ability to walk. It's called a 6-minute walk test. And that is the holy grail, the gold star for health span lifespan. Indeed, it shows full body coordination. It indicates neurological, cardiac, and pulmonary lung coordination and control. It involves strength. It's known to decrease falls and hospitalizations, and indeed up to 25% less chance of dying, all-cause mortality, if you walk faster. So that clinical trial was quite remarkable in its outcome, a first in the world. And that led us to then do a phase 2 clinical study, double-blinded, randomized, 5 different hospitals, where we investigated the safety and the efficacy of our M1 stem product, this time in a broader population. So we didn't restrict it to osteoarthritis, but rather in this phase 2, we allowed aged individuals, so they had to be seniors, but a very wide range of muscle atrophy and or fatness.
Hmm.
So we measured their fat, we measured their muscle, and determined if they could get into the trial, but it was called a basket adaptive. So we worked with a very broad range of people with different levels of fat and muscular atrophy, but they all had to have those things. And in a double-blinded randomized manner, we conducted the study over a course of a year. And then we just unblinded that very recently. And I tell you, being a drug developer and unblinding a phase 2 clinical trial is one of the most harrying experiences. There's no questioning after that result whether your drug works or does not work. Without a double-blinded randomized trial design, you can't really tell if your drug worked. Like, for example, in our phase 1/2A, the ability of our patients to walk faster and further within 6 minutes was remarkable. It was really excellent. But you can't actually rule out that it wasn't the placebo effect. Maybe they just thought they got something that would help them, and their willpower alone is what drove them to walk faster. But in a double-blinded randomized study, everybody's going to have that same willpower. Everyone's going to have that same placebo effect of perhaps thinking they got the drug. And but of course, the people who got the true placebo, no drug, they did not increase in their ability at all. However, our treated population in the phase 2 double-blinded study, we just unblinded at the interim, And but we did see that we had met our phase two end result, our top line primary outcome that we'd been hoping for. So we actually hit the primary outcome and exceeded it. And that was gait speed again. This time we measured it very specifically and have a 26% improvement in gait speed, a validated predictor of disability, hospitalization, mortality, and a key indicator of function, health, and lifespan, health span. And that 26% improvement in gait speed in these elderly patients happened over 3 months. And at the end of the 3 months of recording, it was still going up. So we don't know how much more it would do, but it does portend a very, very strong ability. It exceeded the FDA and CDC's threshold that designates a medically significant, clinically important improvement in health. And we blew it away by a long shot. And I don't think there's been, to our knowledge, there's never been a drug that has caused this level of improvement in gait speed or anything near it. That was all preceded by a whole bunch of studies on elderly mice, in which we saw very detailed, because in those cases we can look at the tissues after treatment, and we see that with regards to muscle, those mice, those elderly mice, had increased satellite cell development, increased myotubes, muscle fibers, whole muscle size, muscle strength, whole body coordination. And indeed, they also lost weight, like we saw in our clinical trials as well in humans. And their limb function improved tremendously. All their joints started basically regenerating. And we see anecdotal evidence of that in our humans, where we take 11,000 proteins out of the blood, and we can see that all of the proteins pertaining to joint function and healing are improved dramatically. So it's a surrogate marker in the humans, even though anecdotally they're all reporting greater limb function. And we do see our top line measurement of gait speed. So it all looks like it's coming together to show that our drug improves not only muscle, but also metabolic health. It reduces fat and joint health. A few other things that we're not recording right now in the humans. Indeed, we have another phase two that was just awarded to continue with knee osteoarthritic patients, just like we did in the phase one.
Mhm.
Whereas our current phase two is broadening it out. Our second phase two is just narrowing in on those patients because they have such a dire unmet medical need.
Mhm. I'm curious, at what point do you start considering a sale of the company's, IP? It seems like, you've done this many times before. Are you approaching that point?
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between what I would like to do and what my what I in reality sometimes. You know, um, I I have visions of growing this company into a massive entity, but reality may say a partner comes in and offers a tremendous deal that I would be shirking my fiduciary responsibilities if I did not accept that. So, my goal is to align my expectations with reality. And I think I've done a pretty good job of that in the past. Um, Entrepreneurs generally reach high and far. And at a stage like this, you have to stop reaching and really focus on the reality of your data set and the need in society, of course, that led us here. And the need is great. Like, we're going to launch this product in combination with GLP-1s, tirzepatide, etc., those fat loss drugs, because they cause 1/3 of the weight loss is muscle loss. And that restricts the use of those drugs. They're phenomenally potent drugs at fat loss, but they have some side effects. And the worst of them all is muscle loss, because muscle loss in the aged is something that's pretty much irreversible and
Mm-hmm.
has huge benefits on your health and your brain activity.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to launch into that one. So given that, and given the fact that I think last year GLP-1 like drugs did about 150 billion in sales, the highest selling drug in human history. I think what's probably happening is that we will be approached by one or more of those companies that are selling those drugs in order to partner.
Hmm.
And so that is my desire as well, because I think we could really help a huge amount of people in a very short period of time, while we're also continuing to develop the drug for indications that are outside of GLP-1. So, we see huge potential here for muscle development, metabolic betterment, joint immune health in younger populations as well.
Hmm.
Professional athletes, anybody that breaks a limb, perhaps post-surgery, right?
Hmm.
Anytime that you're bedridden and you experience muscle loss and fat gain, we'd like to keep you healthy during that time, so your recovery is probably going to be better. And then, of course, immunological compromise, and that comes in either disease or pathogens. We may have some benefit there, but there's a lot of places to go. But in summary, I think the first one, by way of exit, is going to be, and partnership is going to be combining this with GLP-1s. And we're very excited. We have huge pharma is very interested. We're in very deep conversations with them. Everybody's looking at muscle. It's one of the most investigated fields on the cutting edge of health span right now.
Hmm. On this podcast, we always like to touch on the entrepreneur's journey and learn a little bit more about the person. Um, where are you from and how did you get your start? And did you ever foresee becoming a multiple time
Hmm.
entrepreneur?
Well, I was born in Canada, and I did my PhD there, and then postdoc in Cambridge University, UK, and then I became a professor at the University of California at Irvine, assistant, associate, and full professor. That was a 15-year journey, and at the same time, I was a professor of Keio University in Japan.
Hmm.
So pretty busy on the professorial front. About 150 peer-reviewed publications. I think I provided all of the machinery and brain work for about 120 patents, and found chartered member of the NIH for most of that time, and just built a one of the leading stem cell centers in the world with my colleagues at the University of California, Irvine, and that really all of that work. Um, Really, I always had a desire to apply. It's one thing thinking things up and working in dishes or in mouse, which usually precedes drugs in humans for safety reasons. I really had a desire to apply my work to real conditions, in patients, to see the drugs develop. So I became versant at drug development, and where I was an inventor, an entrepreneur, an explorer, and that's how I really see myself. That's how my gut is, and my brain works that way. I just channeled all that towards drug development and loved it because it pushed me. I'm a real geek, and it pushed me into several areas of the unknown. It seems that every week that I exist, I'm tackling a new unknown thing. I
Hmm.
remember calling my dad saying, "What is EBITDA?
Hmm.
What are board minutes?"
Hmm.
And so I think I was sort of made for and led and followed my heart to do precisely what I do. And I tell you, I am eternally grateful that society, investors, board directors, etc., clients have all supported me to be able to continue to do this. It truly is a blessing, a really beautiful thing to be doing with my life. And we've had a lot of successes over the years, a lot of drug development, and this is one of the best we've done, me and my teams.
Have you found that you've been able to optimize the process of starting biotech companies, given that this is your fifth one? Do you tap into the same network of folks? Do you have the same kind of team members, same investors, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a great question. I put the bulk of what would be considered my success onto the staff that work for me. I think it's about 18 people that have worked for me for 22 to 26 years. And they followed me out of my university laboratory through to my first and second and third and fourth, et cetera, fifth company. And so there, I had a really good win when I was quite young, and I've had them through my career. And win meaning a very important scientific discovery, and not only important in my mind, but important in the views of the funders and grant agencies and investors and big pharma. And so I was able to, with the resources that I was able to pull in at a young age, get people that were my age and older than me and far better than me at various aspects of drug development. It's not only brilliant scientists, but it's heavy work for technicians that have to be in that clean room 7 days a week, always keeping the cells alive. It is, medical. It is regulatory, FDA work. It is hospital. It is university. It is legal. It is fundraising. It is governance. It's tax. It's audits. There's a huge number of specializations that all have to work perfectly. And having people for so long with a lot of philosophy guiding us. Like I put in place several guiding elements that allow productivity, and these people are the number one thing. The next one would be, the principles that guide. I have a saying to stumble small and stumble frequently. So it's okay. I have a policy of there's no failure. There is never a failure. As long as you put up your hand and you say, Hans, I can't do that. No one can do that. What you're asking is impossible or great idea, but it's not going to take a month, Hans. It's going to take 6. And, we don't have the resources. We don't have the money. I don't know what you're talking about. All of those responses are not failures. Those need to be celebrated. So the companies that I build and run are all surrounded by a psychological safety
Mm.
where you're a hero if you kick back on not just me, but anyone that you report to and all your colleagues. And we celebrate that. We realign, stumble small, call it out quickly. And then the last thing I do is I have a lot of behavioral elements that I bring in. There's we work on an unlimited paid vacations. We work on you are your own boss. If you're not going to show up to work today, you don't have to ask. You just tell. So every employee is their own boss. They have a responsibility to those that's working around them, but they have full flexibility in when they show up, when they go home, but they just need to get their work done. But that empowers an individual. We do a lot of other things like pay for their health and everything in the most we can possibly do, including gym memberships and things like that. But it's I lean heavily on that and the philosophy, the people and the philosophies that surround it in order to affect this. I guess the last thing I'll say is a lot of my career has been advising governments at the president ruler level, minister of health level, and FDA level, and I just love doing it. But selfishly, what that has done is given me a very good view of what's coming next in healthcare. What are the biggest things? Where is legislation changing? Where there's going to be new opportunities? So, for example, I helped put in regenerative medicine laws in Japan. I was just one part of a great machine that allows regenerative medicines to skip a phase 3 clinical trial there to move faster. That's now rippled into most agencies around the world. And likewise, secretome technologies being even considered as a drug, as long as they can be produced very, very well. So a few cutting edge, if you can see what's coming, you can generally find something to fit that.
Mhm.